episode of Anderson Ad Break. We're your hosts, Sam
and Maddie. We're doing a two-part series on women in leadership at Anderson, and today we'll be interviewing our creative director, Sara Cody. And then on the next episode, we'll be interviewing our VP of Account Services, Adri Delpiaz.
Sarah is responsible for all things creative here at Anderson. She brings all our clients' visions to life through media campaigns, billboards, beer cans, and branding, and so much more.
And as our creative director, she works with everyone in the department, from our project manager, video editor, associate art director, our copywriter, and any other freelancers that we partner with.
Sarah, welcome to the podcast. We're so glad to finally have you on.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yes, so what we normally do is start out with a few rapid fire questions just to get the energy flowing, and then we'll head more into work-specific questions. So are you ready to get started?
Let's do it.
Awesome, let's do it.
What is your go-to girl dinner?
I would say anything with wine or tapas. Like, I love to share a good small plate, like Mediterranean, pass things around. But I also am a sucker for sushi.
Good choices.
Okay, my next question's a little bit odd, but if you were a font, what kind of font would you be?
There are hundreds of thousands of fonts in the world, so that's kind of a tough one. But I recently saw that Jessica Walsh of And Walsh established her own type foundry, and all of the fonts that they create on behalf of the foundry are based off of emotions.
Ooh.
Which, everything has a little story of its own, which I thought was really interesting. So I dug in a little bit more, and there is a font called Sonder, which is based on connections. So all of the ligatures and legs and arms and connecting pieces of the font are very unique. They have different weights, they have different curves, and it's all based on sort of this backstory of interconnected relationships. So I really related to that one. So it's beautiful and very versatile. So I would say Sonder.
Follow-up question really quick. What's a type foundry?
Yeah, a type foundry is essentially an organization or business that specializes in customizing and creating and designing fonts from scratch. So it can be anything from web font, display font, just something that's really crisp and clean that you use for body copy, but they can be commissioned for unique one-off brand initiatives. But yeah, that's what they do.
Cool. The more you know. I just didn't know what that was. That's really cool.
That's so cool. Next question is, what is your favorite sport and or sports team?
Okay, that one is way easier, and I would say baseball. I grew up playing softball around parents who played baseball and softball. My whole family, I think, at one point played the sport. I did work for the Diamondbacks for a few years and took them through a huge rebranding project that was super exciting to work on. Sort of thought at one point that was like my dream job, but just really cool to be behind the scenes there. But yeah, my happy place is at a ballpark.
What artist has inspired you, Sarah?
I would say from my recent trip to Mexico City, I visited the Frida Kahlo Museum, the Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera Museum, which is actually the home that she grew up in. She is a world-renowned artist, not just in Mexico City, but known for her very unconventional take on use of color, subject matter. She was in a really tragic accident at one point in her life, and that sort of informed a lot of the subject matter and the style that she developed. And I think beyond that, I would say probably Van Gogh and Picasso. I actually styled a self-portrait off of Picasso's Cubism at one point in my life. But Van Gogh and Picasso were both sort of starving artists in their time, and they didn't really earn a lot of their recognition until well after their time of creating. And they were both responsible for really big movements and doing things that were very different. And when everyone was painting or creating in one style, they sort of went off on their own and took risks. So, I would say.
And I would say they paid off.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone has a Van Gogh or a Picasso that is like up for sale, call me.
All right, now that we have all of the rapid fire out of the way, let's dive in and get to know a little bit more about you and your role here at Anderson.
Okay, so Sarah, who are you? Where'd you come from? Where'd you grow up? How did you kind of get to where you are today?
I am from Metro Detroit originally. I haven't always lived in Phoenix, but I've always loved visiting Arizona. I grew up visiting my godparents who lived in North Scottsdale, and just always loved coming out to the desert for, the escape of the cold weather in Michigan. So I'm a Phoenician now and have roots here, but prior to that, I grew up as the second oldest of 5 kids in my family back in Metro Detroit. And I have a huge extended family, not just a huge immediate family. My background is Polish, Italian, and Filipino. So we love big family get-togethers. And all of the cousins that I had growing up were like brothers and sisters to me. I live a very active lifestyle. I love to be outside as much as I can, which is great to live in Arizona for that. And just like a couple crazy things that happened to me growing up. My family went through a house fire a while ago. And in the same year, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. So it just sort of shifts your perspective on things a little bit. And just makes you kind of operate a little bit differently, because what literally doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Right. No, those 2 life events happening in the same year must have been, very like awakening for you and helped you kind of develop the person you are today. I mean, that's like a lot of things to go through in one period of time. How did you like overcome that?
I think it shifts your perspective really quickly. These are things out of anyone's control in most scenarios. And I think it just makes you put value on being present in your life and focusing on where you're at. And at the end of the day, things don't matter, right? People matter. And I think I've been able to pull that mentality into a leadership role, my creative perspective. I love working with people from all across the globe. Different personalities require different skill sets, and execute work differently as well. So it's nice to just be able to really focus on the human element of interactions and relationship building. And so I think that's sort of the key thing that I've taken away from both of those things. And life is really too short not to have really great relationships. And so anytime you can invest in that and be present is really important.
So Sarah, can you give us a brief little overview about your role here at Anderson and what you do?
I am the creative director, as you guys have mentioned. So I truly am responsible for everything creative that comes into the agency and is built and goes back out into the world. But also from a leadership perspective, I am responsible for the business development, organic growth of the agency, obviously collaborating between account services and our creative departments to make sure that everything is moving seamlessly. It's on time, on budget, pushing big ideas, inspiring the team, overseeing creative execution. But as a history and classically trained designer, I dive in when I need to and can get my hands dirty and actually be a part of the production and the execution myself. It's sort of a 360 role, not just creative.
So what is a common misconception that you've heard about your job?
I would say the one that sticks out the most is that being a creative director is strictly an artistic role. So creative director, I direct creative. That's not all a creative director does. I think the most successful creative directors have sort of a 360 flex on business development, creative strategy, brand management, and all things that sort of fall under those umbrellas. And it's definitely about creative execution. At the end of the day, you want those big ideas and you want to be able to, create work that has an impact and that is reaching goals and is delivering on an ROI. But in order to understand how to get there through the creative process, you also have to have some perspective on those other elements. So it's anything but just being creative and artistic. And I think it's a heavy combination of all of those things.
Yeah, that was definitely a misconception I think I had about a creative director before I even started at an agency, knowing that you have to deal with the business side, working with, as you are a part of our leadership team, you have to work with, Ted, our agency owner, and Adri, our VP of Account Services, to come together and collaborate on everything across, even the client side. You have some experience there as well. So I think that is a really good point to make, that creative directors are a lot more than just the creative as well.
We do a lot more than just making things pretty.
Yes.
But you do make a lot of things
But you do.
That's one of the perks.
Yes. Speaking of which, what has been your favorite project to work on here at Anderson and why?
We work on such a huge variety of work, different industries, different clients, different projects. The tactics that go into the development of large campaigns are always a little bit different day to day. So it's hard to probably narrow one down, but I do love working on things that are sort of integrated campaign level type work. So we're involved from not only the creative concepting perspective right at the beginning and upfront, and thinking about the strategy and the different ways to problem solve what our clients are bringing to us, and seeing all of that through, but it touches every discipline. So there's a video element, there could be a branding element, certainly strategy up front. Our art director and copywriter are working hand in hand at length on, a lot of execution and a lot of ideation. So I would say anything that's 360 like that, but a couple of our clients stick out for just general work that really hits that mark. And I would say probably a lot of the work we do for Desert Financial, and a lot of the work that we do for Arizona Science Center, typically is multifaceted and integrated that way.
So going off of that, what has been the most challenging project, and how has that helped you develop your creative skills?
Oh, challenging. I would say when I worked for Quicken Loans back in the day, I was responsible for not only creative strategy, leadership, but also I sat on their brand leadership team as well. And the largest initiative that I was responsible for sort of co-leading there was their transition of the Quicken Loans brand to the Rocket brand, which was a 3-year long engagement. So very long lead time. We worked with a number of external agencies to really bring clear and strong subject matter expertise into that development. But internally, we were responsible for the communication with our C-suite level stakeholders. So our CMO, our CEO, even the chairman was very, very involved in all of the decision making and the strategy and the breakdown of that process. But again, it had to be a brand that was flexible, that could be applied to a portfolio of sister companies, and that had both a B2C side that was very clear and easy to communicate, a B2B side of the brand, and also an employer brand that sort of sat over a huge umbrella of companies. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of different players were involved in that process, but it taught me a lot. I got to flex a lot of my soft skills and communication, collaboration, but at the same time I was, designing, brand marks in my spare time, and really invested in the actual design and the creation of everything that came to life. And I'm thankful to say they are Rocket now, so I guess that work paid off.
Yeah. Have you ever had any challenges being a woman in the creative space and workforce? And can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the creative industry as a whole has been typically male dominated for a while. When I was entering the workforce, there was some crazy stat like only 3% of creative leadership roles were held by women. So, the flip side of that being 97% male. But I think taking a step back from just the statistics and knowing that there were already some barriers at play there, I really just wanted to focus on the work and make sure that that was able to speak for me.
And then in your view, do you feel like women now in the creative field are getting the recognition and visibility that they deserve?
I do think that depends on the organization that women are working for or with or around. The foundation and the values of many different organizations are, built in a different way, in a different manner. I was recently very humbled and honored to be awarded the 2024 Creative Professional of the Year by the American Advertising Federation here in the Phoenix chapter. And looking back, that award has been around since 2011 and is awarded to one person in any creative discipline each year. And I was the first female to be awarded that award.
Oh.
So since 2011, all of those recipients have been male recipients. So not only was it a humbling moment, but I think about how I got there and the opportunities that I've been given, especially on as a creative director for Anderson, and being afforded a seat at the table from a leadership role, the collaboration and the opportunity and the autonomy that we have here, that I have here, and that we try to instill also in our peers and our colleagues from a leadership perspective. So I think in the past it was definitely, I had to cut my teeth and really fight and speak up in a crowded room and not be afraid to maybe make mistakes and force the work to really speak for me, because there wasn't maybe that clear path forward from male leadership in the past. But I'm certainly awarded that here, and I have the trust and the relationships here, and not only does that allow us to make great work and collaborate. I think be advocates for our clients in amazing ways, but just bringing, a new perspective to the marketplace from, a female perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's especially why we wanted to do this podcast episode, two-parter, with you and Adri, because it is amazing that we have two women in leadership positions who are, helping this agency run alongside, Ted. And so I think it's really inspiring. But, it's 2024, and it's interesting to see, maybe that, there is maybe still some room to grow for other organizations. But I think as a woman, I know we've talked about this, like, to make sure you find space where you're welcome and make sure to find areas where you will thrive in, grow, because there are opportunities for women now in positions like creative leadership roles. So what was your experience like entering the workforce as a young creative?
Exciting and challenging. So coming from West Michigan and, being involved in a very intense art program coming out of college, I had very big, exciting thoughts about what my first creative role would be. Not all of us can just jump into a Google or an Apple or a Nike role from a creative space right out of school. So I think I had my sights set really high and ended up having to sort of recalibrate my expectation, not only as a new grad, but also, a female in a design role. So I did sort of start and grind as a principal designer, a production artist, which I think actually was really important to just be able to put my skills into, real life moments and real work and real expectations and deadlines and timelines and, maybe not the school parameters that I was used to working in, but just as a female too, I think being a little, concerned about being able to speak up in a room or have my voice heard or share big ideas. That was one of the challenges that I had to learn to overcome, but trusting, my skill set and knowing that I could let my work speak for me to a certain extent was certainly a part of that process.
How would you describe your leadership style? Like going back on kind of like starting off, and were there any like aha moments to what kind of like made the leader that you are today?
Yeah, I think it starts from certainly what I learned as a production artist or a principal designer, understanding that having subject matter expertise in something doesn't make you the expert in everything. So that I think was certainly a moment where I knew I had to expand my skill set. I had to want to continue learning, not only from a physical program perspective, but also from the people around me. So I think finding a mentor or having, a good relationship with some of the creative directors in the roles that I had as maybe a designer or a design manager were really important. And again, just being able to channel my energy in building those relationships, learning from them, and then applying that to creative execution and just being able to grow my knowledge in strategy, business development, branding, and then it just sort of kind of molded from there.
Yeah, and can you describe some more, it sounds like you already kind of did, but can you describe some more skills and characteristics that you think make a great leader and creative director?
Yeah, I think thinking strategically about things and having a 360 view and at that bird's eye level is really important. You can't let yourself get lost in the weeds. But as a creative director, I think I try and focus a lot of my leadership style on, being people first, again, going back to those relationships, but being inspiring, I think, is a huge part of that. It's really hard to find a fresh, bright, new, crisp idea that hasn't been done already. So constantly wanting to be able to learn, keeping my head on a swivel about what trends are out in the market. I think just being very compassionate and being able to channel a lot of empathy as a leader is super important, both as a creative director and leader in that space, but a leader in general. Everyone is different. Everyone likes to be led differently. Feedback can be maintained in a number of different ways, and that's not always the same. So there's not one broad brush, answer to the best way to do things, or, you have to navigate that a little bit differently depending on the people you're working with. So I think all of those things combined certainly help, but you have to know when to push and pull on certain levers, because sometimes you need one of those things more than the other, and you just kind of have to flex that over time.
Yeah. And how do you spark curiosity, and how do you stay like up to date with all the trends and stuff to lead a team? Because I know we do have like deadlines, and you have to do a creative project within a month or time span. So kind of how do you like navigate that with your team?
I love that we have so many different personalities on our team and different perspectives. Everyone has a passion outside of Anderson that makes them unique and brings a different view to the work that we're doing. But personally, I think continued education, professional development, growth, all of that. So any additional tutorials I can be taking, any different tips and tricks that I can be learning. We're very fortunate to take the team to Adobe Max, which is like the inspiration and just the keynote speakers there alone are super incredible to have access to. But yeah, I mean, just browsing, reading, learning, it's constantly changing. So being able to have a number of different resources at your fingertips is really important, because some make sense for certain work and others don't.
I loved hearing about your experience last year from Adobe Max, so I'm really looking forward to when you guys all get back and hear all about the new features that Adobe has. So I'm very excited about that. Has there been anyone that has inspired you on your journey and that has shaped your leadership style?
Yeah, I think that's easy, and that would be my mother. Specifically from women in leadership perspective, shout out to Annette Bilski. She is the OG, and she's kind of the glue that keeps the crazy together, both from a family and a professional perspective. I mentioned earlier that I'm the second oldest of 5 children, but she has always been able to be there for our family first and foremost, but never let her career take a back seat to that, and has had upward mobility and has overcome a lot of challenges herself. So the way that she has been able to face a lot of, adverse moments in her life really impacted me. And if you can't operate with a figure it out attitude, she usually defaults to the let go and let God. So she's very faithful. She's very faith driven. And I think that just has an underlying influence on, the things that I know that I can't control, and I have to kind of relinquish that and focus on the things that I can.
When you went into the creative field as a young professional, did you always know you wanted to be in a leadership role? Did you always aspire to be a creative director? Or was that something you kind of fell into the more you worked on projects and the more you worked with other people, and you're like, I think I can do this. I think I want to lead a team.
I think seeing my mom being able to have the best of both worlds, it definitely made me want to become a leader myself. I think I was influenced by a lot of creative directors that I worked under and with in the past as well. So I did always find it very exciting to have a seat at the table and to be a decision maker and to be able to influence the true impact that those conversations have, both internally on the way your team operates, but also externally on the way work is perceived and, becomes something real in the world. So being able to have influence there is really important to me. I certainly have that here at Anderson. I've got a great team from a leadership perspective, a great team here just in my peers and my colleagues. Everyone's willing to listen, but that has to be really like an active listening engagement. So that goes both ways. And yeah, leadership I think has always been on my radar. And after a certain point, you get to kind of a maxed out position where like you're no longer a doer. You want to be a doer and a leader, or just a leader of the doers. So some combination of that, I think, eventually transpired in my career path.
Do you think there are any changes that need to be made within the industry to kind of support those looking to obtain like a higher level leadership position?
Yeah, I think obviously looking for advocates in and around the workplace and in your work-life balance is super important, not just in, the place that you work, but your close circle outside of, your professional life. There are platforms that are making a lot of change right now. I mentioned that 3% stat earlier. There's actually an organization called 3%, and their initiative is based on increasing female representation in creative leadership roles and sort of evening out that playing field. But a couple others that come to mind are Chief. It's an organization that is open to any industry, so it's not just creative focused, but it's a C-suite level opportunity of very like-minded and very welcoming women who want to encourage and sort of be mentors and pave the way and open up that conversation to people who maybe don't have that opportunity or don't know where to look for those resources. And then another one that I do follow is Ladies Get Paid, which is led by Claire Wasserman, and she has been fighting for equal pay for female representation in creative roles and just not creative, but not, industry agnostic, right? So that's across the board. But I think it's important to not compete against the women that are close to you or in your field, but, become advocates for each other and build each other up. And you can find that in male and female representation too. So just finding a good core group of people that can really support your goals is critical.
I'm definitely taking notes on all of those resources. I definitely can't wait to look them up. You mentioned competing. So have you ever felt a time in your career where you felt like you had to compete? And if so, how did you navigate that?
Yeah, I think there have certainly been moments. I think working under or with other female leadership in a creative role, when I was in more of a doer position and, in the trenches of design and less at the strategic level or that seat at the table that I was mentioning. It's pretty common, I think, for women to want to keep that control and that power really close to the vest and not share that because they've worked so hard to get there. But the minute you open yourself up to the opportunity of being able to collaborate with someone who wants nothing but the best for the work, for the organization, for your immediate relationship, the possibilities are endless. So I think when I was in more of a graphic design position and under some, female marketing leadership, it was really hard to kind of break that down and just let myself be known as an advocate. But again, at the end of the day, I mentioned being able to let the work speak for you. And when it's great, it's hard for anybody to poke holes in that. So just make sure you're doing your due diligence and you're invested in that, and you're working on the things that you're passionate about at the end of the day.
Do you have any advice for young creatives entering the workforce? Like, is there anything that you wish you would have known, or anything you wish someone told you when you were entering?
Yeah, I think young Sara would have loved the opportunity to hear some advice in key moments. But from my perspective now, I think it's really important to know that you have to put in the work. It's not, a career or a role or a path that, things are given to you. I think instant gratification is something that everyone is very used to in the world nowadays, especially with the advancement of technology. So I would say, work hard for the things that you're passionate about. Check the ego at the door, right? So the competition element that we spoke about earlier, I think is critical. Being ready and able to learn from people around you. Entering the workforce, certainly you don't and won't know everything, and things are changing by the moment daily. So you need to be able to be flexible and sort of roll with the punches. But I think also from a female perspective, emotions are a big thing. So patience, I think, was one that I really learned to place a little bit more importance on, but also being able to laugh at yourself. Don't take yourself too seriously. It's okay to fail hard, fail fast. But learn from those mistakes. Don't, be one of the people who's a repeat offender, and just be able to, channel that energy into building relationships with a mentor or someone close in a role that you admire or a path that you want to follow, and take that time seriously with those mentors, because most of the time I think it's great to have in the moment, but you may not place the value on it until it's gone, and then you wish it was back, and it's hard to get that. And so yeah, I think all of those things combined, it may sound really generic, but when you really put them in practice, it makes a huge difference.
No, failure is something that no one wants to do, but I do think it's an important part of growing up and actually becoming a better, not only person, but, a coworker, mentor, because you have to learn from those mistakes, right?
Absolutely.
Our parting question for you is, do you have any advice for women looking to transition into those leadership roles?
Absolutely. Everything that, a young creative needs to know certainly still applies to women pursuing leadership roles in the creative field. But I think if you see an opportunity, seize it, take it. Don't be afraid to, speak up in a crowded room. I think it's really important to, again, be able to fail and fail fast if you need to, but to learn from those mistakes. But not second guessing yourself really proves that you're confident in what you have to say, that your work has been vetted, that the strategy is there, that you've thought through those things, and it makes it that much harder for someone else to maybe poke holes in what you're presenting or the opportunity that you're going after, and just sort of, lays a good foundation for that. But also I think mentorship is a key part of that too. We don't always have the written playbook ready for us at our fingertips. So I think mapping that out with someone who has proven themselves in a similar industry or even industry adjacent is really important, and just taking that time very seriously, and investing in those conversations and making sure that you have kind of the opportunity to always have access to that person, not consistently and overbearing in that way, but in a way that, you know, you're building that relationship and they're invested in you, you're invested in the information, and they can see you putting that to work at the same time.
I love ending the podcast on such great advice. So thank you so much for joining us today and getting to learn more about you and sharing your expertise.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thank you guys so much for having me.
And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to stay tuned for our next one with Adri Dalpiaz, our VP of Account Services.
And like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on all social media channels to stay up to date on all things Anderson.